Welcome, listeners, to Exposed, the truth behind Wondery's Missing Sister podcast. I'm Gina Blue, and I survived a Black Hebrew Israelite cult called Israel United in Christ, better known as IUIC. From 2016 to 2018, I was a devoted member. Since leaving in 2018, I've worked tirelessly to educate others and share the stories of survivors from IUIC and other high-control Black Hebrew Israelite groups. I documented my experiences even while healing from religious and mental trauma. I've shared survivor stories, interviewed former members, and advocated for families in custody battles, families whose children were trapped in IUIC because of brainwashed ex-spouses instructed to cut off their unbelieving partners. Over time, I built trust with individuals and families desperate for answers about who IUIC really is and what they teach. In early 2025, something happened that I can't stay silent about. I felt that I was exploited by people I believed I could trust. Journalists from the UK who claimed they were covering the tragic murder of Joy Morgan. Joy Morgan was a 20-year-old midwifery student who was killed by an Israel United in Christ leader named Shofah El Israel. They convinced me to sign a contract that I later discovered stripped away my rights under UK law. As an American, those laws shouldn't apply, but their misrepresentation left me vulnerable. They told me that the podcast would be called the Joy Morgan Podcast. But later, they changed the name and narrative using Joy Morgan's story as a Trojan horse. In my opinion, I feel that they took my original content, my original research on Bishop Nathanyel, IUIC's leader, and a former New York police detective, and repackaged it as their own. The work became the backbone of Wondery's 6-part investigative series, The Missing Sister Podcast, released on September 10th on Wondery Plus. They erased my contributions, exploited me, and turned Joy Morgan's heartbreaking story into their entertainment. Since 2018, I've been on the front lines speaking out against IUIC and supporting families who are waiting for loved ones to leave this cult. I've taken calls, joined video chats, and responded to countless comments from people who trust me because I've lived this experience. I lived this reality. I was a member of IUIC for 2 years, and when I left, I became a whistleblower, one of the first to publicly expose them. I've endured harassment, death threats, smear campaigns, and stalking from IUIC leaders and members. I showed my face, used my real name, and refused to hide. In 2019, BBC featured me in an investigative piece and credited my contributions. I even appeared in their documentary, The Murder of Joy Morgan, where the journalists treated me and Joy's family with respect and compassion, covering Joy's tragic murder in detail and keeping the focus on her story, the way ethical journalism should be done. So what happened with the UK journalist behind the Missing Sister podcast on Wondery? I'll tell you what happened. Greed happened. The UK journalist behind the Missing Sister podcast approached me via email and on social media for an interview back in February and March of 2025. Even messaging me on social media when I didn't respond to their emails or their deadline. When I finally agreed to speak with them, I gave hours of in-depth knowledge of IUIC, shared my research on destructive cults, and even answered personal and very intrusive questions about my life. When they pushed for information about former survivors, I initially resisted, but eventually connected them with a lead, another American Black woman, to strengthen their credibility. That guest was a former wife of an IUIC leader, someone I had interviewed on my platform, Tales from the Cult, back on July 4th, 2018. At that time, she showed her face and spoke publicly. With these journalists, she chose to remain anonymous. Despite the trauma, miscommunication, and IUIC interference that strained our relationship, she still trusted me enough to share her story. And what did I get in return? Nothing. No credit, no mention of my YouTube channel, no acknowledgement of the years I spent building trust and documenting IUIC. They even promoted another woman's channel while treating me like I played a minor role in their podcast series. I only realized they had taken my research without my consent when I listened to episode 5 of the Missing Sister podcast. They cited my work almost word for word. My angle. Not only did I reveal that Bishop Nathanyel was an ex-cop, but I showed his photo in uniform, his NYPD salary history, and the fact that he served as a detective until 2016, years after founding IUIC in 2003. The video is still on my channel, Karizma Speaks Official. To make matters worse, I uncovered a court case showing Nathanyel and his partner were sued for the wrongful arrest of 2 Black men falsely accused of robbery. This was unknown to IUIC members and even to me before my research. My video exposing this case was posted in 2019, earning over 400 likes and more than 100 comments. The journalists they didn't just take this information. They went a step further, interviewing the lawyer from the very case that I exposed, reframed my work as their own, erased me from the narrative, and allegedly walked away with big paydays, media opportunity, and praise for their so-called investigation. Meanwhile, survivors like me were exploited, ignored, harassed, and used for entertainment, and not to mention a grieving family in their grieving process, believing that this podcast would help bring awareness to her story, but it really brought awareness to the actual cult that I've been exposing. These journalists, through podcast parties, pretended to be cult experts during interviews and were celebrated for the work that I had done. While they partied, I relived trauma all over again. And the lead I gave them even broke down crying on their podcast from all the pain. That infuriated me because despite my mistakes, I am fiercely protective of survivors, especially those I've interviewed. This isn't just about me. It's about ethics, integrity, and protecting survivors from exploitation. Over the next few episodes, I'll break down everything: the cult behind the story, the research that I believe they took without my consent, the betrayal and the harm it caused, and yes, the receipts that prove everything that I'm saying. If you care about ethical journalism and protecting survivors, share this episode and subscribe to the Karizma Speaks Official and the Tales from the Cult official YouTube channels so you don't miss what's coming next.